Hello, and welcome to the Cycle Endometriosis podcast, where we will delve deep into experiences, challenges, and triumphs of those navigating a life with endometriosis. Join us as we share the stories of resilience, offer insights from experts, and foster a community of support for those affected by this often misunderstood condition. Whether you're newly diagnosed, a seasoned warrior, or seeking understanding, I hope this podcast is here to help empower you and uplift you on your journey. Tune in as we break the silence, shatter stigmas, and amplify the voices of the endometriosis community. Medical disclaimer: this podcast is not intended for the purpose of providing medical advice. All information, content, and material of this podcast is for informational purposes only and is not intended to serve as a substitute for the consultation, diagnosis, and/or medical treatment of a qualified physician or healthcare provider. Thank you so much for being here, and now on to the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this month's episode of the Cycle podcast. Thank you so much for being here and listening in this month. I would like to welcome our guest, Marisol. Thank you so much for coming today and chatting with us about your story. How are you doing?
I'm doing good today. I'm doing good. Happy to be here, most definitely. Thank you for having me on the podcast. I'm happy to tell my story about this very complicated condition, and I feel as though by telling my story, I'm not only advocating for myself, but also my endometriosis community.
That is so true, and it's so appreciated. You're very brave to come on and share your story. So thank you so much for doing that, and it's definitely helping everyone who's listening right now. So we really appreciate it. Why don't you tell us just a little bit about yourself before we kick off and talk about your endo story?
I'm Marisol. I live in Philadelphia. I love the city. I've been here for now way over a decade. And I don't know what else to say about myself. Oh my God. I don't know what else to say.
Well, I love Philly. Philly is such a great city. What's like, do you love the food or like just the city itself? Like, what's the best part about Philly?
I think the best part about Philly is the camaraderie. Like there's just like this real sense of community here. People look out for each other, and and we're really proud to be Philadelphians, even though the country might not like our Eagles. I love the Eagles. But yeah, I would have to say that. And that's a pretty big difference from New York, where I'm originally from.
Yeah, and Philly, like for our friends who aren't listening that are not in the US, because we have a lot of international friends who listen, Philly it's like a gritty, cool city. But if you've ever seen Rocky is in Philly, and there is so much, like you said, pride and camaraderie. And Detroit is kind of similar. I would say we're similar. I think you all are a little bit like better with the camaraderie, and it's a smaller city, but I think we have similar like grit. I would describe it.
Yeah, no, I would absolutely agree with that for sure.
Yeah, I love it. Well, that's great. Well, good to know. And I also love Philly. I've been there a few times. So that's a lot of fun things to say. Okay, well, let's transition. Let's chat a little bit about, your endo story and kind of how things started off for you, when maybe you started experiencing symptoms, or, however you'd like to start sharing.
Absolutely. Well, my earliest memory of endometriosis pain was when I was 13 years old. I even know the day. It was Mother's Day. I was struck by this intense pain in my pelvis. And I'd had my period ever since the age of 11, but this pain was different. It was so unbearable that I couldn't even stand. I found myself on my bed, curled up in the fetal position, wondering what is happening to me. I felt like I was being ripped apart from the inside. And I can remember my mother coming into my room to comfort me, her putting her hand at my back in this sweet maternal way. And she told me, it'll be okay. This is just what we have to deal with as women. And I thought to myself, this is normal. And and
Yeah.
unfortunately, like as endo sufferers, we are constantly getting the message from loved ones, society, and the medical community that pain is normal for women. And that message is dangerous. It reinforces suffering and silence, and pain is not normal. So eventually, my mother came to the conclusion that what was going on with me was concerning, and made an appointment with the doctor. This was the beginning of medical gaslighting for me. I was told, you just have bad periods. No further assessment, no solutions, just the message that I will have to endure this pain, period. It contributed to my silence for so long.
Yeah.
In addition to the painful menstrual cycles, nausea and vomiting started for me that year. And for the life of a 13-year-old to be experiencing constant nausea and vomiting, it was really difficult. Even at that age, I sensed something was wrong with me. And years later,
13 is like a
what?
very hard age. 13 is such a hard age. I know I say this all the time on the podcast, but that's like middle school. It's just a very hard time in life too. And to have that in addition to how challenging that must have been.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Developmentally, it was tough. I should have been having fun with friends. Instead, I was in tremendous pain most of the time. And years later, I ended up being misdiagnosed with irritable bowel syndrome. The diagnosis of IBS never could explain my other symptoms. And at the time, I didn't see how they were tied to my menstrual problems. I wasn't piecing it together. And the medical gaslighting combined with the IBS misdiagnosis it left me unprepared for what lay ahead with endometriosis for me. Medical incompetence has consequences. And unfortunately, that consequence led me to live a large portion of my life blind to what was happening. And I might have planned my life a little differently had I known. So that was hard. Education and career trajectory were very much impacted. Education was a blur of missing school or having to leave class early because of horrible symptoms, asking teachers and professors for a later deadline because, I had class assignments that needed to be, submitted, and it was hard. There were missed opportunities, both educationally and career-wise. Looking back, it's amazing I got as far as I did with 2 masters. The chronic ovarian cysts and fatigue started around my undergraduates. And the ovarian cysts eventually became chronic and brought me to doctors left and right. I began experiencing dyspareunia, otherwise known as painful sex, and I brought that to my gynecologist. It was dismissed rather than being considered a valid symptom, and research shows that painful sex is not only a major symptom of endometriosis, but often the most neglected symptom. Instead of it being taken seriously by doctors, I was told, have a glass of wine before being intimate. That was their solution for me. And that
And
was
throughout this time, Marisol, like leading up to this and these times, were your symptoms starting to just get worse as time went on too, and more on like a daily basis? And
absolutely.
at this point, were you like, I know something's wrong, but you weren't able to get answers? Like you said, you knew it wasn't IBS. Like you had an intuition that like all of this wasn't being caused by IBS and, you know, missing school and things like that. So intuitively you knew something was wrong, but you just were not able to get answers.
Exactly. I was left in the dark completely.
Yeah.
Specifically during my graduates, like during graduate school, all of my symptoms got progressively worse. I could barely stand dealing with my periods. I became so sick that that week each month was a nightmare. You know, I started feeling dizzy and fatigued more and more. There was more menstrual pain, more nausea and vomiting. My concentration and focus was all over the place. And in grad school, attention and concentration are kind of an important thing.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. And but very challenging when you don't feel well on a daily basis and just nausea, vomiting, pain. How challenging for you to then be working on grad school. I 100% understand.
It, it was so challenging. And basically in October of 2020, I had an ovarian cyst rupture that changed my life. It was an endometrioma cyst. Up to that point, it was the most painful experience of my life. Pain level was a solid 10, and I was terrified. My partner took me to the emergency room, and I can remember the endless amount of tears streaming down my face. For the first time in my life, I was administered morphine, and they administered it before my internal vaginal ultrasound. And so this ultrasound was supposed to check to see if I had an ovarian torsion. However, the morphine didn't kick in. It was my blood-brain barrier protecting me because I had never taken a drug as significant as morphine before.
Right.
I went through the entire examination with just as much pain as I walked in with. And because I expressed that the morphine didn't work, the physician's assistant accused me of drug seeking. And if he had bothered to look at my medical chart, he would have seen that in previous visits, I often would refuse opiates because of my nausea and vomiting. It would actually increase those symptoms for me. You know, and so to be accused of drug seeking while experiencing that amount of pain was infuriating, and I felt helpless.
So incredibly hurtful, and you're there desperately seeking help, and to be accused of that is so inappropriate and infuriating. I
Absolutely.
can't even imagine. So what happened the rest of that visit? Were they able to determine that you had a cyst rupture?
Yes, absolutely. A massive cyst rupture for sure. You know, and I thought, why am I being treated this way? You know, was it because I'm a woman? Is it because I'm Latina? You know, both. It was traumatizing, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone. And yeah, it was hard.
Very hard, very, very hard and unacceptable. An unacceptable way to be treated. You're talking about something that happened 4 years ago. We're in a modern society. It's so unacceptable. And it's the lack of awareness in this disease. And I know people hear me say it all the time, but that's such a huge issue that people should automatically know when you're coming into the ER with pain like that, like asking you, do you have endometriosis? It could have helped you because you probably at that point still had never heard the word, had you?
Yeah, absolutely. You got it. It took me 2 months to heal from that cyst rupture.
Yes.
And while resting from that pain, I used my health background and got to work in doing research surrounding my symptoms. I had a lot of time, while
Yeah.
being in bed to do that research, and I ended up narrowing it down to endometriosis. And once I met with the gynecologist, which they referred me to after this cyst rupture, I told her, I'm like, I have endometriosis. I need to be screened and tested for the disease. And I was right. It was endometriosis.
Wow. Right. After all those years, too, of raising the flag and saying you weren't feeling well. And then when you were doing your research, obviously you probably put together the symptoms with then the diagnosis. And in that moment, when you saw that and then, went to your doctor to advocate for yourself, how did you feel?
I felt empowered because I was sticking up for myself. Like, this is what I have. I need to be screened for it, and it was just utilizing that voice. We very much need to speak up as, people with endometriosis, because this isn't right. It isn't right what we deal with. It isn't fair. The research isn't out there, so the doctors aren't informed, and it's up to us. It's up to the patient to take control. So it took me over 20 years to get that diagnosis. Now, when it came to treatment, I was told hormone therapy was my only option. Even after I expressed to the doctors and medical staff that I had been off birth control for 6 years because it made me so ill. There are endo patients that find birth control to be very helpful for their symptoms, and I respect that, and I'm glad that it works for them. But for me, it was the wrong treatment. The amount of medical gaslighting I experienced was astounding. I didn't want to take the medication, but since I was desperate and I kept being told over and over again by this gynecologist that it was my only option, I took it. And I regret listening to that gynecologist very much. Sorry about that. And so the birth control was supposed to stop my periods. But instead, the opposite happened. I was heavily bleeding every single day. I was dizzy and faint. My pain level increased rather than decreased. I even started experiencing new pain. The insomnia, or rather painsomnia, increased. And so after 2-3 months of that, I demanded to be put on another birth control. And unfortunately, that second birth control did more damage than the first. Yeah, I became bedridden on the second birth control I had tried. I was consistently in a state of extreme pain and inflammation. Beyond pelvic pain, I also developed hip pain, lower back pain, and leg pain. My menstrual pain increased. The painsomnia was so bad that I was hardly sleeping at night. My nausea and vomiting also got worse, to the point that my nausea would wake me up. It wouldn't just be pain. I would get woken up by the nausea and have to run for the bathroom. I was also experiencing fever, chills, and dizziness every day. And my left side was more impacted than my right side. So I couldn't even sleep on my left side. That was how sensitive it was with inflammation. It was terrifying. It was a terrifying time, a living nightmare. And my significant other said that he thought I was dying in front of his eyes. To see my partner suffer because of my suffering was unbearable. There are no other words. The doctors and nurses were dismissive when I tried to advocate for myself yet again. It wasn't until I started complaining of lung and chest pains due to the birth control that they started taking me seriously. I was getting severe heart palpitations as a result of it. Like, my body was just rejecting this medication. And needless to say, I got off that birth control, and I was amazed at how much better I felt. I was no longer bedridden. And I was bedridden for 6 months. It was that long. I left to that medical institution. I dropped to that horrible doctor. Before I left, I told that doctor exactly what I thought about her and how I was treated there as a patient. And that was empowering. That's when I got my power back.
Good for you. I'm so sorry that you had to even go through that. I wish I could jump through this screen and give you a hug right now, because I understand. And I'm so, so sorry. It's just inexcusable how you were treated, and to take this medication. It made you so sick. It's just unacceptable from the doctors. Like, I'm infuriated for you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I know you understand.
Yeah.
I decided to take control of my health and go the holistic route. I did extensive research on endometriosis and diet. I'm on an anti-inflammatory diet that resembles the Mediterranean diet. I know I'm estrogen dominant, so considering that endometriosis is estrogen dependent, I also try to eat foods that help in balancing my hormones and decreasing the estrogen. I moved my healthcare to another. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
I moved my healthcare to another medical institution, and I could not express the relief I felt. There, I experienced empathetic doctors that respected my disinterest in hormone therapy, understood my need to go the holistic route with endo treatment. And because I had the right doctors, I also learned that I had interstitial cystitis, IC, which is inflammation of the bladder, which is also common for women that have endometriosis. And now I'm currently doing pelvic floor physical therapy, and that has been great. It's taught me so much about my body and pelvic pain, and I've noticed even a difference in my pain levels. So that's everything. That something was working. And yeah. So the brighter side of all this, my struggles with endo did bring me to the world of technology. Tired of the medical gaslighting that came with endo, I researched products that could help me manage my symptoms. And what I found was tech companies that were dedicated to providing concrete solutions for women's health and feminine health technology and sexual wellness technology, really opened my eyes to another facet of health. It allowed me too to even hone in on my interest in data science and AI. And I even started a blog called A Little Bit Data Curious. Um, so so that's positive. And my experiences with endo also led me to get in touch with my creative side and get through the hard times. And I actually started writing endo inspired horror book. Uh, yeah,
That's fun. Okay.
it is. It's just my outlet, and I absolutely
Yeah.
love it. And so like I most definitely have a survival kit when it comes to endo, or rather an endo kit, that gets me through. And number one is a supportive network. I am so grateful for my family and friends that have been there for me throughout this entire experience. My partner is my rock. His love, his patience, and his understanding has been my light in the dark. And so that's definitely number one. Number two is having the right doctors, and to my fellow endo community out there, if you do not believe in your doctor's ability to help you, please find another doctor or medical institution. I am so happy I did. Three is that diet, the anti-inflammatory diet. It's done wonders for my symptoms. And four would be my tools. I have TENS units. I have two large TENS units. One TENS unit I have is on the go, so I can use it while I'm walking around, daily life. And hot water bottle, heating pad, pain relieving CBD lotion. And my lotion of choice is Melt by Kush Queen in California. Highly recommends that CBD pain relieving lotion. And last is the anti-inflammatory teas, like green tea, chamomile tea, ginger tea. That has been very helpful. And I would say the last thing on my endo kit is most definitely yoga and exercise, as research shows that it can help in decreasing inflammation. So that's basically it. That's my story.
Well, we really appreciate you sharing. And I just think you articulated it so well and in such an impactful way. I mean, I am so sorry for all that you have been through, just like so many endo patients, and the pain and the struggle. And, I was getting choked up when you talked about your partner, because I'm getting choked up right now. I feel so much burden and guilt sometimes because of how much I've struggled and how much it's cost, and just needing that person to be there for me. And my husband's amazing, but I carry a lot of guilt around that. And that's why I was getting choked up when you started to mention that, because we're so lucky to have these support systems that we have. And I think it should be acknowledged on the show more. There should be a group for them, family, friends,
Yes.
supportive loved ones, because this disease is behind closed doors. It is such a challenge, and people do not know if they've never seen it. And I'm sure you've had these similar experiences where I've been on the floor and do we call 911 or do we not? And it happened to me this summer, and it's, do we go to the ER? Do we not? And it's that person who's sitting with you, helping you get through it. And it's really challenging. And I hope that everyone who's listening to this has someone that is by their side, because this disease is so challenging behind closed doors and even public facing.
No, absolutely. for sure. That's why that was like number one on my endo kit, is a supportive network. And my significant other has been amazing. He has been there for me in so many different ways when it comes to this condition, because there's so many different pieces to endometriosis. And you most definitely nailed it with the burden and the guilt, because I most definitely feel that, and when I mentioned that to him, you know, he just he just smiles and he's like, I'm here for you. I am there for you, and
Yeah,
that's why I say he's my rock, because he's unmovable. He's there for me. Um,
just beautiful. It's really beautiful. And Um, I love your endo kit and what you have in your kit, but also as going more of the natural approach. I know you mentioned the anti-inflammatory diet and teas. Is there anything else that you want to mention as like a part of that? I also love ginger tea. I feel like that's really helped me a lot.
yeah.
But is there anything else that is part of like your day to day that you've personally noticed a lot of a difference from? Any like a supplement or anything? Like magnesium for me has been very helpful. I take it before bed. It helps me sleep.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, no, absolutely. I forgot to mention that. So I take holy basil as a supplement, and it actually helps in controlling my ovarian cysts. It's been very helpful, and so there's that. And it helps also in balancing cortisol levels. And as you know, with endo, we most definitely experience a good amount of stress with our symptoms. So that's helpful. And also, in regard to my interstitial cystitis, I take marshmallow root, and that was actually recommended by my doctor for the condition, and it's helped immensely, for sure. So definitely, those two. And I've actually started taking once in a while selenium, because it helps with fatigue. Because my fatigue can get so bad that it's just like, God, I need to work. I need to get things done. I can't lie down right now, and the selenium helps. And so I would most definitely recommend those things. They've been helpful for me.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And you also mentioned, yoga and exercise. And obviously, when we're in our like crazy pain spikes, that's not something that is possible. But, what are some of the things that you do if you're having kind of a rougher day? Are you resting, or do you go for a little walk or try and do some stretching? What are the things that you do?
No, absolutely. So I definitely try to listen to relaxation music and meditate. I take my puppy for a walk. I have a miniature Aussie doodle named Egon. Yeah, and he's wonderful, and he's been such a big help, for sure. It's amazing, the love of an animal, what it can do for your healing process. And so thankfully I can go on walks with him and, soak in the sun a little bit. And that's most definitely helpful. And I would say that staying outside for long periods of time has been helpful as well. Like just putting out a picnic, type of, blanket, just reading,
Yeah.
and, get staying away from my bed, or staying away from my apartment, and just like trying to enjoy the day. And even if it's just a little bit, that's been helpful for me.
Yeah, I think that's really beautiful. And there are so many beautiful parks in Philly, if I remember correctly.
For sure. We have Clark Park that's actually right down the street, from me. So thankfully I can go there. And it's a beautiful park, and I enjoy taking my puppy there. So yeah.
Yeah, that's good. I think that's really good advice there would be times I remember sitting out back, and we both live in places where there's very cold winters and sloppy, wet winters. But like, I remember sitting outside on my deck, not feeling well at all, like very sick, but just like letting the sun hit my face. And it really did help me just kind of take it down a notch. Obviously, it didn't make my pain go away, but it just helped me get a little bit out of that fight or flight, because when your body is just in pain like that, I just feel like it just helped me kind of like, didn't make the pain go away, but I felt like I could, like my shoulders relaxed a little bit, like just having that warm sun on my face, which I agree with you. I think being outside is very helpful if you can do that, or taking a short walk. Not on the level, obviously, high level pain days, you have to rest and do what's best for you. But on the days where it's like you're in pain, but moving a little bit, it does help. The blood flow, I feel like, helps.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's done wonders, at least for my mood,
Yeah.
It's like you said, it's not going to eliminate the pain, but if I can boost my mood just a little bit, that's helpful, and that's a win.
Yes, 100%. And then the last thing I want to talk about in your kit is you mentioned anti-inflammatory diet, Mediterranean diet. I'm sure this is something that people could Google if they're interested in learning more. But are there any things within that diet that are like your favorites or you'd recommend to people?
Let me see. Omega-3 is amazing and helping with endometriosis, for sure. So definitely salmon is a big one for me that's been helpful. Honestly, salmon and greens is probably my favorite meal these days. A lot of greens. I have a green smoothie every single day. Every single day, I'm trying to get as many greens as possible in my body to help with inflammation. And so I would really recommend implementing that in a diet if you can. What also beets have been extremely helpful, especially in decreasing my ovarian cysts. I highly recommend that. And also a little thing that I do that helps with ovarian cysts as well is I make an apple cider vinegar drink. Believe it or not, apple cider vinegar has been phenomenal at helping me with my ovarian cysts. I heat up some water. I put like half a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar, honey, lemon to help with that vinegar taste. And it is really helpful. I will take it in the morning, like every morning up until I'm like, okay, the cyst is gone. Okay. I don't have to take it anymore. So highly recommend that. And yeah, I would say that those are my favorites.
Yeah, that apple cider vinegar drink just sounds delicious regardless. Like, I love honey, I love lemon, actually kind of like apple cider vinegar. So
Yeah.
that sounds really, really delicious. I feel like those are very good, helpful tips for sure.
Yeah.
For the Mediterranean kind of like anti-inflammation diet for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, good.
It's done wonders for me.
It's very helpful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And is there anything else as we kind of wrap up that you want to share that we missed or that we didn't discuss?
Just one thing, and I mildly talked about it earlier, which is to my endometriosis community out there, remember that you matter. Do not discount your experience. Do not suffer in silence. Use your voice. Your voice is your power. Use it. So I would say that would be the main big tip. Our voice is empowering.
Beautiful. Very well said. And I couldn't agree more. I know sometimes it's very hard when, exactly like what you were talking about, people just won't listen and they keep gaslighting you or pushing back on you. And sometimes maybe you need to take a couple days off or a week off and regroup, but then keep fighting because there is hope out there. There's a lot of hope. This is a very challenging disease, but there's hope and there's a great community and there are resources and people who will help you. You just got to find them.
Absolutely.
So, and let's hope in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years that we don't have to have these conversations because endo is more well known and there's more awareness and there's treatment options. And that is my hope in my lifetime that I see that happen.
Yeah, I hope for that too, Melissa. I do.
Marisol, I so appreciate you coming on and being so brave and vulnerable and sharing your story and articulating so well how you felt. And it's because of people like you sharing that awareness is built. So thank you again so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for having this podcast, and you're shining a serious light on this condition by having this podcast. So, thank you very much.
I appreciate that. And thank you all listeners for listening. Please share and spread the word about this disease. Share this podcast. If you're struggling, there is hope. We are here for you, thinking of you. And if you feel so inclined, please leave a 5-star review wherever you're listening to this podcast. I really appreciate it. It helps us get more reach, helps us get more guests for the show, and just spreading awareness for this disease that just needs more awareness so there's less suffering. Thank you again for listening.